the Devon Pension Board. I have no announcements from the chair, other than to remind you we are being live streamed. Apologies.
Thank you. We have apologies from Helen Pennock and Councillor Lynn Rousel.
Thank you. Declaration of interest. You will note that in the agenda there is actually an item regarding that. I understand that you have recently been circulated with asking for revised declarations of interest if you haven't previously submitted one, or have previously submitted one, but things have changed. Thank you. The minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of October have been previously circulated. Are you happy that these are a true and correct record?
Happy.
Yep, thank you. I've got no items requiring urgent attention. So we now move to item 6, review of attendances, pages 1 to 4.
Yes, this is just the usual report. So if there's anything missing, or if I've got anything incorrect, please let me know. Or if you've attended any sort of training outside of what's provided at sort of Devon County Council, perhaps an online webinar or etc. Let me know, and that can also be added to your training record.
No one's got anything to say. We'll move on. Item 7, employer monitoring.
Okay, thank you, Chair. The contribution monitoring at the last board meeting, you may recall, I advised that we had a new finance system called Unit 4 that went live in April. At this time, we also embarked on a system called Haycentric on the automation of monthly contributions into Unit 4. The figures supplied at the previous board report was based on the date of payment as notified by the employer on their remittance advice. Since then, I've undertaken an extensive reconciliation exercise, and this quarter's figures have been based on a date the money actually arrived on the bank statement. There is one employer of concern who appears to have adopted a practice of submitting contributions bi-monthly. This has been raised with the employer concerned to rectify the situation. This report goes up to the end of September. The situation with this particular employer did carry on until the October and November contribution that was received in December, so the October contribution was late as well. But I'm pleased to report the employer has put procedures in place, and the December payment was received on time in January. So the situation appears to have been thankfully now resolved. As requested by the board, I've included a table just to provide the board members with a bit more detail on if there have been any late contributions, if there's a history of them being late, etc. So the board can make a decision whether they think it's a material matter or not. Regarding the employer that paid bi-monthly, I have not to date reported it to the pension regulator, but I'll refer that to the board if they wish to think that that is appropriate.
Any questions?
Thanks, Charlotte. No, I don't think it'd be appropriate to report as a material concern, particularly that we understand it. But I just wanted to thank Charlotte and the team for the addition of 3.4, which is incredibly helpful. We've raised this a few times now where we, as a board, I don't think we truly understand when it would meet the threshold as a material concern. But now the new 3.4 certainly delivers that. So I appreciate it's a bit of extra work, but thanks for the addition.
So should we hand over to Gareth for the...
Just come back to you on the one.
Sorry.
Related to 3.4, admitted body 800. Measures have now been taken to resolve that situation, so they now will be paying
On time, yeah.
hopefully on Monday.
Yes.
But
yes.
please keep an eye on that.
Oh, absolutely. As I said, the December contribution was received on time, so I'll be keeping a close eye on them.
Right, thank you very much. Right. Any questions? No.
So is it just over to Gareth for the employer? the employer performance summary, the second half of the paper.
Yep, of course. Thank you very much. I will skim over much of this wording at the top because it relates largely to just ongoing items, but in essence, 6.6. We mentioned before, I think I mentioned it a couple of times, but the new sort of process in place around employer inquiries is working very well. Just by way of current update, we've gone from about 1,400 inquiries at start of this financial year, down to about 200. So we've shaved off about 1,200 employer inquiries, and up to the point of this report, we've had to make 2 fines, £100 and £200 respectively. Just to give some context, that's 2 and 4 outstanding inquiries, so only 6 inquiries in total. The employers have been invoiced for those, and we're expecting monies to come in accordingly. 6.7 refers to the employer reports that we said we'd get out by the end of the year. Most of them have gone out. There was a new report set up. So again, just as a reminder for context, we were reliant on an audit created report before, which was incredibly detailed, but we couldn't control it. So if we wanted to make any changes and things, we were reliant on a third party to do that. So we've moved it in-house and created our own report, which went out, as I say, to most employers in December, and there was a few errors that came up, data errors basically, that we're clarifying, and those ones are going out over the next few weeks, so that will be in place. Moving forward, we said they're on a regular basis, we'll be sending them out. What we've said initially is likely to be every 6 months until we can get a little bit more automation in there. At the moment, it requires a manual email to be sent to every employer, so circa 500 employers across both schemes that we look after. And as you can imagine, trying to do that often becomes problematic just from a time constraint. So we're looking at automating it, but the next one should go out around June time. And then we'll look to bring that down to quarterly from the next financial year. If I scroll down now to the sort of data, so going down to it's page 10, I think, of the report, agenda item 7, you will see the leaver notifications. Again, slight update, I think, for this this quarter. I've just refined it a little bit to try and make it a bit easier for everyone to see the figures here. But you will see, as ever, the bulk of leavers being either a deferred benefit, so that is somebody leaving under the minimum pension age. Refunds, so somebody leaving with less than 2 years service, and then the next chunk is the undecided leavers, or leavers waiting to be determined, which basically is the group of people that have left but haven't told us what they want to do with their pension yet. Those, for context, are likely to be over the minimum pension age and have more than 2 years service. They just haven't told us whether they're taking benefits at this point in time. And what I've then done is just provide some of the numbers underneath again to try and contextualize the sort of wider picture there for you. If I move down to the next slide, we've got here again a little update to the information, but we've got the leavers, the time to notify. You will see here the bulk of them sit within the sort of 22 to 60 days, with about 17% greater than 60 days. That sounds like a long time, and it is for notification. However, it is likely to be the length of those is likely to be things like death in service, ill health, retirement, some of the more complex ones that do just take a lot longer for notification. From the date, should I say? But the bulk of them sit where you'd expect them to see. The reason there's some here that you'll see in the negative, that's because we're made aware of it beforehand. That could be efficiencies. It could be just an employer getting well ahead of things and telling us somebody's retiring early. But nothing stands out materially there, month on month, quarter on quarter from any of the previous data reports we've seen. And then the last visual I've got on here for you on the next slide is just the new scheme starters. Again, you'll see this reflects July, August, September. Big spike in September, but again, that is very seasonal. We see it across all of the funds we look at, really, but it's likely down to the cyclical nature of some of the contracts we have in place. And whilst not entirely this, I would point to things like schools. A number of those staff are on yearly contracts that start and end around the September time, so we do see a big spike then. Not uncommon at all. That was everything I had in there. Were there any questions on those before I hand back over?
Thank you. Yes, Gareth. Sorry, Ron.
Yeah, hi Gareth. I don't know if you can hear me okay.
Okay.
It's not greatly important, of course, but just that it stands out, opted out, 140, the longest days to complete. Yet simplistically, if somebody opts out of the pension scheme, to me, it don't take 140 days to sort it out. Have I got the right end of the stick?
Yes, so that's the time, generally speaking, it's the time to notify to being completed. That's normally because we are told late. So the opt-out part itself is fairly straightforward, as you rightly point out. But sometimes it may take a few months to actually reach us by the time an employer shares the data. Not uncommon, and I would stress the volume of opt-outs is comparably small. So again, it gets skewed quite easily when you have that. So that average there of 64 days, even that feels long, but it's likely to be one or two long cases, so late notification from employers, that skews the whole average, for that. But yes, that does seem higher than you'd perhaps want to see.
I guess opted out is lower priority in the scheme of things.
Yes, it is. Yeah, ultimately, there's no immediate impact. So if we were to look at a priority list, they would sit very, very far down, because ultimately it's more of a data issue than anything else. It's just us updating a system to say somebody's not paying a pension, rather than something that has an immediate benefit, such as a retirement or a deferred, etc.
Yep. Okay.
Any other questions? Dominic?
Yeah, hi Gareth. Just more of an admin thing, even recognising that deferred and preserved benefit are the same. And on the table below for reason for leaving, it's different to the pie chart. One's preserved benefit and one's deferred. Again, a bit of a moot point, but I'm just conscious, we just had a conversation around certain people having, early knowledge around pension and what it means and training. So maybe just a bit of a tidy up there, that'd be great. Also want to say that this is the best sort of data that we've had for some time in terms of leavers, much more comprehensive than we've had in the past. One thing I did note that what's been added to this was the deferred benefit, preserved benefit. That wasn't included in the previous figures because I couldn't quite get the totals to tally up, and that was what was missing. Is that correct?
Yes, and that's why I've tried to sort of overhaul it slightly to make it clearer. Fair point on the preserve versus deferred. That'll be the areas we pull it from, and name it slightly different. So I'll go through and just manually update those moving forward. I will likely call it deferred, just for consistent language. It can be a bit easier to understand. But yes, that's why some of the numbers historically, when we've looked at them, you've struggled to line them up.
But from a board's point of view, just want to say, Gareth, this is probably the most information that we've had around leavers for since I've been on the board. So it's very, very helpful. Thank you.
No worries at all. Happy to keep evolving it as well. I say these things are always changing as and when we get more stuff, and opt-outs is a particular one that you'll see more as we go throughout this next financial year when the reporting changes. So watch this space on that. I'll keep developing it there as well.
Thank you, Gareth. I'm just aware that overall the scheme advisory board are interested in relation to opt-outs, as are the government, and so it is something which we're going to have to report more often and more frequently, and potentially in more detail. But no doubt we'll find the regulation at the appropriate time. Thank you. Item 8, pension fund risk register. Charlotte.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. I've updated 5 risks on the risk register, though these amendments / additions did not change the overall risk score of those risks. Risks B3, B4 and CU1 have been updated to reflect the current position of the pooling project and the wind down of Brunel. F9 regarding the collection, etc., of contributions. I've updated one of the mitigations to amber because it did say that we have procedures in place regarding monitoring of contributions, etc., and I've changed it to amber just to reflect the fact that we're grappling with new systems and we need to refine procedures and process going forward. So hence I just changed that. And F10, a mitigation has been added to reflect there is a new practice of for admitted bodies linked to academies that are now on pass-through arrangements, so there's no potential funding implications on the fund anymore. So that mitigation has been added to F10.
Could you explain a pass-through?
A pass-through is basically where so that essentially you on one extreme to the other, you've got an admitted body coming in, taking on a contractor, let's say, provide some school catering, for example. In the past, they would have been set their own employer contribution rate, and they would take on all the risks of running the scheme. So if the investments crashed, if you like, as suddenly, all the asset values went down, they would suddenly have a deficit, exactly like Devon County Council would, for example. And there's other risks of inflation risks and pay rises and all sorts of things. They carry all the risk. And ultimately, when the contract finishes or the last active member leaves, there's a cessation valuation done, which could very often reveal a deficit, and they're expected to pay that deficit. What a pass-through arrangement does is effectively the employer comes in and their costs are far more known in advance. Typically, they will pay the same employer contribution rate as the old employer. So for these academy pools, they pay the same employer rate as the main academies, and that's all they pay, if you like. They don't get past any more all risk at the end of the contract. That's it. They've paid their monthly contributions, and they walk away, and any risk of deficits or surpluses, etc., remain with the original academy employer.
Thank you. Clara. Has anyone got any questions relating to the risk register? Rob.
Yeah, sorry, and I realise there's a couple of very minor things, but just quickly, page 31, right at the top, the risk is governance arrangements from the previous page. So page 31, top, it says internal audit review of succession planning undertaking Q1 24. Some management recommendation to consider going forward. That if it's amber, my question is why is it amber if we undertook it in 24? Surely by now we've considered the recommendations and are actioning them.
Yes, I apologise. I failed to update that mitigating action. You're quite correct. So we had the audit, and we have now made an addition to the investment team. So there are some sort of succession planning sort of in place. So apologies, I failed to update that mitigating action. That has actually been actioned.
No, that's good then. And there's just one other on a similar vein, really, a minor point. Page 33, again, retention of skilled staff. We've got amber, regular appraisals with staff to support staff and understand career goals and plans. So, presumably we've got appraisal procedures in place, so therefore it's green.
Yeah, I don't know if Gareth wants to say anything. This is a Peninsula Pensions risk part of the risk register, but I accept your point. There's sort of Devon County Council employees. There are sort of appraisal systems sort of in place. So I would agree with you, but I don't know if Gareth wants to add anything.
No, I can't see why that wouldn't be green. I would agree. So just for context, we have a minimum of one-to-ones every 2 months. I can do it sooner, but the sort of standard would be every 2 months as an absolute minimum. And there are some metrics around what must be included. So things like development, retention, things like that. So they're all in there. So leave that one with me. I'll catch up with Rachel here and see if there's any reason that I'm not aware of that wouldn't be green, and then I can respond if that's okay.
Thank you, Gareth.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Ian.
Just to think the unthinkable, as I think that's possibly why we're here. We've obviously heard of the pooling of our investment needs. Is there a risk of a requirement to pool our administration needs that needs to be considered? I just raise it?
We haven't heard anything sort of on the jungle drums or you know, to suggest there should be any pooling of administration. But that's not to say sometime, you know, that couldn't be the case. I could give that some thought and look at potentially put it on the register. I'll give that some thought.
Any other questions? No? Okay, thank you for that, Charlotte. Good, right. Move on to the next item, conflicts of interest.
Okay, so back in 2019, the Scheme Advisory Board launched the LGPS Good Governance Project, and the actuarial firm Hyman Robertson was appointed to undertake this work. It was done in 2 stages, with the final reporting in early 2021. And finally, we've now seen recommendations for improving governance coming into being via the last year's sort of Fit for the Future sort of consultations. The amending regulations that will be coming in 2026 will require the fund to have a conflict of interest policy in place specific to the pension fund, which will apply to the committee, board members, officers and advisors to the fund. Barnett Waddingham, our actuaries, have produced this draft policy for us, which will go to the investment committee at its meeting at the end of February. This is the board's opportunity to put forward to the committee any comments you may have on the draft policy. Thank you.
Has anybody any comments?
So can I just clarify? We've just obviously been asked to fill out a conflict of interest policy. So was that under what procedures was that?
So that's under the, so if you look at 2.1 of this report, references the Devon County Council's constitution. So that's for members and co-opted members of the county council. So you count as co-opted members apart from Councillor Keeble, who's a full-fledged member.
Sure.
So it was under that, and that was more in relation to a review post-May elections and making sure that we've kind of got updated ones for everyone.
Okay, so we'll then be doing it under the new one if it's approved by the committee.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You should note that there are some additional questions in the new one related to spouses and partners. So I would have to declare that my wife is also in receipt of a local government pension. But these little things are what trip people up, so be aware of it. Is this, you said that this was part of the new guidance coming in. So when does this come into effect?
Well, we believe the regulations are coming into effect from April. So yeah, we just,
The notorious 1st of April.
yes, the notorious 1st of April, and we're just getting our house in order and put the policy in place.
Thank you. Item 10, Investment Fund Committee minutes. These have been received. Has any members got any questions relating to these or any points they wish to raise? No? So I assume these have been read. Item 11, future investment pooling.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is a brief update on the pooling project. At the September meeting, the committee approved in principle that the Devon Fund should join the LPPI pool. 6 of the current Brunel funds in total will be moving over, and officers have been busy with working with LPPI, Brunel and other funds to make this happen. It is proposed that the current governance structure of LPPI is changed to create a new topco company, of which LPPI will be a subsidiary. The funds would then be shareholders of the new company. Work is in progress agreeing heads of terms for the shareholder agreement, which is due to be signed at the end of March. The government's aspiration is that all assets should be transferred to LPPI by the 1st of April, albeit in the regulations it allows for 28 days, so that's the 28th of April, but whichever date, it's extremely tight deadline, as you can imagine. Work is progressing on an advisory management agreement, which will need to be in place before any assets can be transferred. Some assets are easier to transfer than others, and where possible, the preferred approach is to transfer the assets in specie, which reduces costs and removes the needs to buy and sell. Private market assets are already held directly in Devon's name, although the back office arrangements of managing calls, distributions, etc. needs to be addressed and is a bit more involved and tricky. In addition to the move to the new pools, the existing Brunel clients will need to formally wind up Brunel on a fair and equitable basis to all. The exact timing of this is unknown due to there's still a lot of unknowns in the asset and the transfer of the assets project. So hopefully that's just, as I said, a brief overview of what's going on in the pooling project.
Any questions? No, I have a question relating to paragraph 6 on governance. In the existing pool, which still exists, scheme members have 2 representatives on the overall board. I haven't seen anything in here or papers I've seen which actually reflects this in the new scheme, new pool.
No, neither have I. My only comment would be what we've been focusing on at the moment is the sort of legal aspect of setting up that top company and shareholders and that type of thing. What I haven't seen today is how we work as in Brunel's term, like the old client officers, and whether there's sort of scope in that sense. Do you know what I mean? I haven't got a sense of the daily sort of workings, but I will raise that point, Andy. Thank you.
I've just been aware because I actually I've been here too long, and I actually sat on the formation of Brunel as well. And that was an important point in the formation of Brunel, that there was scheme member representation on whatever oversight board came into existence, and we would hope that that would be continued into the present arrangements.
I will take that point forward, Andy. Thank you.
Any other questions? No, sorry. Zoe, I think it's your turn. Internal audit. Sorry, the end.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, so this is the time of year again when we're setting our internal audit plan for the forthcoming year. Just bear with me, so I don't know where my mouse has ended up. So just wanted to, the main thing I want to draw your attention to is firstly that the board are asked to note the proposed internal audit plan and consider whether it wishes to make any comments to the Investment and Pension Fund Committee. I suppose the main headline, I think, coming out of this is that actually we're going to be increasing the number of days in the audit plan for next year from 85 days to 95 days. This is to enable assurance to be provided in more areas of risk and emerging risk during the significant period of pension regulatory and legislative changes, and also to allow us more time to do some ongoing audit work with the quality of employer data, which because employers have to fill out like an interface every month of their data. I think it feeds in with what Gareth was talking about earlier, and we hit some problems with this when we did the work last year, and the fact I think the audit report came out at limited assurance. We've just completed a piece of work this year with limited assurance again. So this is something that's ongoing and will be an ongoing on the plan moving forward. So we've had to allocate a chunk of time to that to try and work with Peninsula Pensions and the employers to try and get this improved. So you'll see on the main things in the plan then are, so just bear with me, it's going down the pages. So the main elements really are on pages, I've got my page agenda item 12, but it hasn't actually got a number on it on the actual, the last 2 pages of agenda item 12 basically. where you've got the plans for Peninsula Pensions and Devon Pension Fund. And what we try to do this year is to provide kind of an audit objective to put a little bit of context to what we're going to be looking at, rather than just providing you with headings. And with that, I just open up the floor for any questions, really.
Thank you, Alexis. Is there any questions? You mentioned that you'd increased the numbers of days allocated. Was that in both audit risk areas for the pension fund and also Peninsula Pensions?
Well, it's primarily sort of a kind of joint, because obviously it puts the cost goes up slightly as a result of that. So I think that it's kind of a joint. They've taken that on as a joint acceptance of that. But the majority of the extra work, if you like, is within Peninsula Pensions area. Around, we got the employer data. Well, not really, because you've got the new pooling. So no, I'd say it's probably across both. There's slightly more in Peninsula Pensions, because we've allocated a bigger chunk of time to the employer data. But no, it's probably across both, I'd say.
Thank you. Any other questions? Lisa?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, with the risk of cyber attack being quite high on the risk register, is there some sort of specialist IT testing within the audit plan this year or previous years? Thank you.
Not on this year's plan, because we've done some work on it. A couple of, I think there was a couple of years ago, there were some concerns that came up around cybersecurity when we did some internal audit work, and then we've done a follow-up at the end of last financial year, and that came out with a much higher level of assurance. I think that the thing is because a lot of the work is all around use of Voltaire mainly is kind of, and those if you like, those external sort of use of sort of the computer software used externally, they're so rigid on their cybersecurity anyway. So actually so that it reduces the risk to the local authority, because of they've got very, very strong, they have to have very strong cybersecurity for administering pensions. So, but no, it's nothing on the plan for this coming year, but it's obviously something that will continue to be looked at, but not on the current year coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alexis. Just a note, whilst the days have increased, I note that the standard daily rate is only marginally increased by broadly CPI. That's very welcome. I think it's good for value from the outset, and an environment at the moment where daily rates seem to be increasing considerably. It's quite pleasing to see that it's only gone up by inflationary rate.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, it's yeah, you just have to cover your inflation increases. So yes, we try and keep the costs down. Yes,
I think it's incredibly challenging at the moment not to increase above that inflationary rate. So I'm just at board level, it still feels like it represents really good value for money, which is something that is critical for us. Often, it's difficult when you look at audit, because you shouldn't look at just value with audit, because audit is incredibly fundamental to us. But very pleasing that it still seems to present incredible value for money at that rate.
Thank you very much. I'll feed that back as well to the partnership. Thank you for your words.
Thank you. No other questions. We'll pass on to our agenda item 13, Pensions Performance Report. Gareth.
Yes, thank you. So I guess that the headlines from this, 3.1 would be that for the quarter ending 30 September, we achieved 95% performance against the objectives, the sort of core principles that we have. We have got here a couple of points really around just focus for us. It's again on deferred benefit and amalgamation cases to get ready for McLeod and to get those McLeod cases over the line. We had 6 compliments in the period, which again, very nice. I'm sure anyone that's worked in customer service knows that it's far easier to get the negative feedback than it is positive. So 6 we're very pleased with. The next few paragraphs really just set out what the indexes do, so I will skim over those. But in principle, there's an upward trend last quarter, which suggests that more work remains outstanding. That's fine. I'll talk through that in a bit more detail when I get to the graphs and go through that. 3.9 again just gives a nice summary that over the last 12 months or so the volume of work has increased compared to previous year. A number of things we've got, individuals leaving the scheme, particularly schools, academies, things like that were more common, but also McLeod generally is creating more work. Expect that to be a bit of a hump that we're going to get over this year, and no doubt there'll be something else that crops up, but that's largely part of it. On the subject of McLeod, 3.10 talks about that, and there's a nice box at the top of page, depends who you're looking at, but 80, 85 or 91, depending on which pack you've got there. But you'll see the outstanding work at the start. There were about 4,500 or so members that needed some form of review or calculation. As at 30th September, we had completed just under 1,800 of those. And the number continues to fall as we go, very much on track for completion with the dates that we have in mind, especially for those cases whereby it's in our control. There's a number where we're waiting information from third parties such as civil service, NHS, things like that. But for the controllables at this point in time, it's doing very, very well. Very, very pleased. The next bit talks about dashboard. Again, there's not a huge amount of update here. If anybody that follows it knows, there's no actual date for it to go live, other than for us to say we are connected, we are ready, we've done everything we need to do from a technical perspective. It now just relies on the actual page being visible to the public, and there's some testing over the next 9 to 12 months, that'll go on, and they'll get an ever increasing pool of the public on it. No doubt when that's the case, something will crop up that we need to look at, but as we stand today, all connected and ready to go. Annual benefit statements, they were all achieved. They got the deadline of 31st of August, and they were achieved in advance. And just some of the metrics there, over 40,000 active ones issued, and again about 46,000 deferred that all went out the door. There were a little note there, 13 active member statements recorded as not issued due to pending data from employers. So again, that's sometimes a timing issue, but you'll see from the volume there, best part of 85,000 and only 13 that had a slight delay. So again, very positive. If I move now down onto the appendixes, so again, page or so down, you'll see just the breakdown. As ever, I won't necessarily go line through line here. There's a lot of detail, but pleasingly, you'll see across the board, all three areas were above the 90% target that we aim for in terms of our performance against the regs. And around 95% overall. Couple of areas that slip below, if I sort of pull them out, you'll see in the high priority deaths, which slip slightly below 86%, you'll see that there. That is, as ever with these type of calculations, there are delays, generally speaking, because we're relying on third parties. We need to find out who's actually owed the money, if anybody. We need to have legal documentation, which can take many, many months. So the fact that it's still 86% is very, very pleasing. Unfortunately, those cases do tend to drag on. If I have a look now at the sort of medium priority, again across the board, very pleasing. The one that stands out there is divorce calculations, being at 60%, but again, not largely surprising. We often get notified of divorces very early, which means that the case is opened. Therefore, it can quite easily slip over the regulatory time frame unless we were to sort of play games and close it down until we were formally notified and reopen it and do those sorts of things. So in principle, they will always be a little bit lower. Again, add in the complexities of the legal system and the documentation we need. Just takes a little while with those. On low priority, there's a few that are lower. Interfunds out, interfunds in, they tend to crop up fairly often. You've heard me say it before, but anything that relies on monies moving either in or out between various parties can be challenging, especially when we throw McLeod in. An interfund out in principle sounds like it's us transferring money out. The problem we may have is we're relying on data from an interfund in. What I mean by that is there could be somebody that moved from, say, Somerset to Devon and is now moving out again. We still require information potentially from the first transfer in around McLeod, and that delays us sending the money out. Hopefully that makes sense, but that's why those areas do tend to dip slightly. In the round, though, not unexpected and not uncommon quarter on quarter when you compare them. Before I move on too much, any questions on those initial numbers before I get to the graphs and things?
Chair, for me. Yeah, thanks. Can you hear me okay, Gareth?
I can, yes.
Yeah, hi, Alistair here. Just want to say thanks very much for the very clear report, and well done on the compliments too. But any kind of learning from either the compliments or the first instance complaints, any common themes or that's kind of
Not particularly. I mean, the compliments have been very pleasing. Most of the compliments are around, which is nice to hear, is around service, very specific, individually named service, rather than generic pleasantries, which is always nice because when it's tailored like that, you know you're getting it right. A lot of the complaints we generally receive are down to a misunderstanding of the time frame. So most complaints, at least first stage complaints, focus on the fact they're unhappy that things can take a couple of months to process, rather than us doing anything wrong. So it's more about an engagement piece and an education piece, which is the learning. And we are currently in the process of reviewing our web pages to make them a bit simpler to understand. So we've got some budget set aside, we've got some time from the team to do so. And over the next quarter or so, we'll be putting a plan in place to jiggle that up a little bit and make it a bit clearer for members, so that hopefully that nips in the bud some of those initial concerns. We're also looking at ways in which we can roll out training for members and employers. Actually, I've mentioned it before, but the focus for the first 3 months of this year, or I guess tail end of the financial year, to make it a bit clearer for you there, is to start creating a suite of videos for members and employers that will be published on our website to review, looking again at those topical areas, you know, retirement, how long does it take, how does it work, that type of thing, again to try and mitigate some of the learning that we've had from those complaints.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Gareth.
Thanks, Gareth. When I joined the board about 4 years ago, I felt a lot of the numbers from Peninsula were a little bit overcooked, and I've often was critical of how they were presented. I'm actually turning to Mr. Positive today because the figures look much better, and not just in terms of performance but in terms of presentation. I know we did a bit of work previously before your time around percentages, etc., but I think you've undercooked it a little bit today, and as employer representative I think it's important where credit's due. If I compare this to a year ago, one of the challenges of when we compare quarter to quarter, and I've raised this before, we always see fluctuations across quarters. What's really important is when I look back over at the same period in the previous year and in the previous year. So being here for a few years now, that's what I always do when I come to board. I always compare it to previous years. And where I say you've undercooked it, you've had well over 2,000 more cases on a year-on-year comparison basis, yet you've raised the overall percentage from what was 90% to 95%. I think what's even more important, one of the things I raised in previous incarnation was around low priority procedures and low priority cases, because there's still cases that affect over 1,000 individuals.
Yeah.
And you move that dial in 1 year from 73% to 91%. Yeah, again, must be turning to Mr. Positive today, but just wanted to give that feedback as a board, really recognise that the increase in performance and the increase in the representation of that performance within the agenda is very welcome. Thank you.
Much appreciated. I'll make sure that's fed back to the wider team. There's an awful lot of work's gone on, and you quite rightly point out, you know, some of the slides a bit further down or some of the graphs a bit further down demonstrate that we have had a material increase in work, yet actually we're doing better than we were. It's a positive. It could have easily gone the other way, but the work put in and the preparation is what's made the difference. And hopefully what we'll see moving forward, once, you know, some of these bigger bits of work like McLeod, it comes up an awful lot, but it is an immense amount of work. Once that's out the way, we can start to utilise some of these improvements we've seen over the last 12 months to make further improvements once the noise of McLeod has gone and the capacity's released back to the teams. So it's looking very promising from where we sit, certainly, you know, for the next financial year to carry on getting better. And what we have many plans to do from both an employer and a member perspective is to increase the engagement. I vaguely mentioned something before, I think last board, maybe the one before. But we have a communications runway set up now that looks at everything we're doing in the next financial year, you know, regulations, changes, website developments, all these things. and puts in place a very robust plan around engagement with members and employers, so they understand it, they know what's coming ahead of time, and we can start to hopefully see a smoother transition. You know, there's lots of things from a regulatory perspective coming in, access and fairness, all these kinds of things that will have impacts, and we're getting ahead of it this time. Any other questions at all?
I have a couple for you, Gareth. In relation to the notifications, the annual benefit statements, those are prepared and are available online.
Yep, most of them are. Yes, yep. Some of them do go out in the post.
Do we know how many people actually bother to read them?
Oof, very good question. Let me go and see what I can find out. We do have some data around accessibility. I'm just not sure if I can get it down to a specific number, but let me see what I can go away and find out.
I thought everything's there, but it's getting people to read it, which is the problem we always find in lots of communications.
So what I can say is on that point very quickly, if I may, is across the board, if I was to look at digital engagement, I guess, for want of a better phrase, that's what you see it called in the corporate world. The fund average is about 56% signed up to member self-service. So if I look at all of the members we have, about 56% are signed up. So you've got 45, 44% that aren't. So that gives you some indication at least of the maximum level of engagement with those. Only 56% of the ones that are online will be seeing them.
Yeah, can I just pick up your point before you go on? Was going to ask, is the facility to actually see whether someone has looked at their statement? I don't know what the level of sophistication is in terms of the kind of website surveillance, as it were. But
yes, there are some areas we can. I'm just not entirely sure with that if I can get the granular detail. So I'll have to go away and find that, but I can send an update through in the next couple of days as to any numbers that are attainable. That should be, if we have them, they'll be easy to pull, and then we can share that.
It's just that if they're although we've met your obligations as an administrative authority to issue these, people need at times to be advised to actually to read them.
Yes. Now, for most documents that get published, an email is also sent. So for the overwhelming majority of documents that are uploaded to a member record, an email goes out to say you have a new document, please log in. But except, yes, is there more we could do? That's the work for this year around the comms runway I mentioned, and that increasing the digital engagement. And what I've seen in previous roles at different employers is if you can increase that digital engagement through communication channels, you will see an uplift in those people using it. A lot of it tends to be a mindset, but we do also have to bear in mind there is a significant demographic within the LGPS that may never engage with the online, just given the demographics we have. It's a little bit of a battle, but yes, I take that point.
Right, I think, and the second point was, I'm aware that the government have just recently announced their response to the consultation on changes to the funds in respect of over 75s and other parties. I know it hasn't. There will be relevant legislation required in place, but have you sort of prepared yourself for that as an administration?
Yes, yeah, and there's, I sort of alluded a little bit vaguely earlier, but there is a raft of changes coming, access and fairness and some of the gender pension gap things, and there's an awful lot that will be likely coming in March, April time, or April for sure, but March the guidance will come out. So we're as ready as we can be for this, but unfortunately some of it does depend on that final guidance, which looks like it's going to land in March. So we'll do what we can, and then March maybe a little bit of a rush over the line for the finer detail, and then we can be in readiness. But I'm certain these things will all be fine. There's nothing really that I've seen that will trip us up or be problematic at this stage.
Just concerned we didn't get another McLeod.
Yes, no, that would be very nice if we could avoid that. But no, there is a few bits like that, but there's nothing that stands out as being anywhere near as impactful as McLeod. Even if on the face of it, it sounds difficult, when you get behind the meat of it, I don't think anything they've said so far is going to be as challenging in terms of volume, certainly.
Right.
Yeah, sorry, Andy, just to pick up on your point there and Alistair's point around communication. We did raise at board with your predecessor exactly how many of our members were accessing that data, and that information wasn't available at that time. But in that meeting, one of the things we raised is we didn't actually know what good looked like, and you alluded to it a little bit there, Gareth. We said, well, you know, some of our members just will not naturally use the internet, for example, or not have access to the internet, or be savvy enough to go in and look at that data. So I think it would be worth going away and go, what does good look like? Because we recognise that we'll never get 100%. My gut would tell me we're never going to get to about 85% or even 65%. But I suspect other pension funds have the same challenges. It might be worth trying to find some data out there to go, look, is 55% good? That, because it's all well and good us going around and go, we only get 55%, we need to get more. It'd be good to be armed with what looks good, because should we be happy with 55%?
Yeah, no, that's very fair, and I would lean on some of my experience in previous roles. I come from I don't mind saying, but I come from an international bank historically. That's my background, so that relies heavily on digital engagement. And even in that environment where you have an expatriate bank account, digital engagement was still only about 60 or 70%. And that's amongst people that are in a completely different country. So the only real way they can engage is either online or on the phone. So I don't think 55 is bad. I do think there's a little bit work we could do, and that's the educational videos that I'm very keen to get sorted. But fair, let me take that away, and I'll speak to the team here, the management team here, and see if we can come up with what would we like? What's our baseline? What does good look like? Really good way of putting it. And then we've got something to work towards, haven't we?
Thank you. Is there another question? No? Okay. Thank you, Gareth.
Okay.
Presentation. Sorry, have you covered it all? Everything you wanted to say?
I think so. I was going to go down through some of the graphs. We've kind of jumped down to some of those points anyway. The only thing I'd maybe summarise at the end is just that we're continually seeing that trend of decreasing levels of outstanding work. So as far as we're concerned, yeah, it's moving in the right direction, and now we've got some headspace to focus on some of the more exciting things, the enhancements we can make, rather than just fighting the beast that was McLeod. But yeah, that was it in summary.
Thank you again. Yes. Right, we now move on to item 14, the fund member survey. Charlotte.
Thank you. Board members will recall that last year officers undertook a member survey. We last did one back in 2022, which was online only, and that survey we had 4,278 surveys were completed online. This time round, the number of online surveys completed was a lot lower, and just over 2,000 were completed. And there was a suggestion of the board. We also sent out surveys in post to those members who had elected to opt out of electronic communications. So we sent out approximately 22,500 surveys in the post, and we had 3,215 surveys returned to us, which is a staggering 14%, which I didn't think was bad. I have to say, I personally took a lot of phone calls from members thinking it was compulsory to fill in, but never mind. So that's maybe why we had such a high response rate. The vast majority of the postal surveys were completed were pensioner members. The details of the results are covered in sections 3.2 to 3.8. Broadly speaking, members were supportive of the fund maintaining its fiduciary duty to maximise investment returns at the appropriate level of risk, as they voted this of very high importance. The responses to climate change were much broader than last time, with a real spread of opinions. The results will go forward to the investment committee at the February meeting and will be used to feed into future fund policies. Thank you.
Members, any views, comments? Can I say thank you to the staff who are this, because actually it is quite interesting that we had a lot, because we actually went out to the non-electronic members, I call them that, but we actually had a significant response, because previously they had been sort of excluded from the survey, which is good. So we are seen to be inclusive. The next survey would take place in approximately 3 years' time.
After which I might have just recovered from inputting all the ones that we had back in.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah, perhaps a short-term contract for someone.
Yes. maybe.
Data input, right. Thank you very much. But and yes, I think it is useful to know that there have been changes in perceptions from the previous surveys, which was a first then. So it's we'll go from there. Right. So item 15, LGPS update.
Okay, thank you. So consultations, and yet more consultations. And scheme regulations arriving a bit like that late bus you've been waiting for. So since the last board meeting in October, we've had the LGPS pooling and governance consultations seeking views on sort of really the technical stuff in new draft regulations as outlined in the report. We have the new pooling and investment regulations covering, as it says on the tin, the new pooling regulations saying that we must be in a pool and delegating the implementation of our investment strategy directly to the pool, etc. We also have the LGPS amendment regulations, which picks up on the new government requirements following on from the good governance project. The LGPS access and protections consultation came out last October, but it was just before the board meeting, so it wasn't in time to pick up at the last board meeting. This consulted on putting protected pension age provisions in place to allow members who joined before November 2021 to keep the minimum retirement age of 55, also allowing for access for councillors and mayors, and making it easier for academies that fall across LGPS borders to move funds. And finally, but no means least, new fair deal changes. So that's regarding the sort of admitted body status. After many previous consultations, the current proposal is that the status of admitted body will be replaced with a deemed employer status, and that deemed employer simply takes on the original employer contribution rate. On similar lines, we were briefly touched on the pass-through arrangements. Effectively, it's like a pass-through for sort of going forward. So the contractor would simply take on the staff, pick up the existing employer contribution rate, pay that while the contract's in place, and then hand everything back at the end. So a lot simpler for administration.
Just to clarify on that particular bit, again, I'm afraid. So where a authority such as Devon decides to go out to subcontract its services, the receiving company would actually take the same employee contribution as Devon would have paid?
Yeah, so if the Devon rate is, I know, 20%, the new contractor, that the staff would be tupied into that new contractor. Sorry. If we say, for example, the Devon contribution rate is 20%, the staff will TUPE transfer to the new contractor, and the contractor will continue paying the 20% employer contribution rate into the scheme. And then at the end, there'll be no sort of exit or surplus payments. They will just simply mirror what's going on within Devon.
Anyone else? No?
Sorry, Andy.
Sorry, Dominic.
Does that mean that new admitted bodies, so somebody under contract, wouldn't need to undertake the guarantee then?
Yes.
The liability will always sit with the local authority.
Yes, that's right. Yes, the concept of admitted body and potentially all the risks associated with having the pension scheme that would have gone to the admitted body now sort of retained with the original employer, and so effectively it's like a pass through. They just carry on paying the rate.
Does that mean probably not one for committee? Actually, it might be one for admitted bodies to pick up with somebody else. But would that mean there's an unwinding of the guarantee system that's been in place for previous admitted bodies? Because that's quite a number, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the admitted bodies that are currently in the fund will continue. They wouldn't sort of change over to this sort of new status. So with admitted bodies, as you will be aware, a lot of it is regarding like pension risk. It's taken into consideration on the commercial, the commercial contract, and a lot of the agreements that I've seen in the past regarding pass-through or risk sharing are reflected in the commercial agreement rather than like the admission agreement, if you like. So, but the with admitted bodies, generally speaking, you've got you've got the original employer. So let's say, for example, Devon County Council outsources, the libraries department, for example, and they are an admitted body. Under the regulations, the Devon County Council would always be the guarantor of last resort, because ultimately in the regulations it will all come sweeping back to Devon. So as a fund, we've always said that the original employer, the letting authority, i.e. Devon in this example, it's their decision to make whether they insist on a bond or not in place, because ultimately it's Devon's risk as opposed to the pension fund risk. There are admitted bodies in the fund, such as Plymouth City Bus is one of them, where there are Plymouth Citizens Advice Bureau, where they are what used to be termed a community body. Now, if they fail or leave the fund with a black hole, that deficit gets spread amongst all the employers in the fund. So the risk is with the fund in those particular examples. So we've always insisted that there is a guarantee or a bond in place on those, because we're trying to protect the fund. So it depends where the risk sits.
Sorry, my own confusion there was between what's regulatory and what's actually discretionary, and there's a discretionary commercial risk that you undertake through the bond rather than a regulatory risk. So, okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. In that case, we will move on to agenda item 16.
Sorry, I'll get there in a minute. Yes, so this is the usual sort of gaze into the future and the board's opportunity to request any items of work or anything that you wish officers to look at sort of going forward. As ever, it's all a bit of a stab in the dark as when some of these things will be available. For example, the scheme advisory knowledge and skills framework, I've no idea whether that will be ready for July. So we've got fair deal in October. The just to go on from the update paper, whilst the pooling and the LGPS amendment regulations we are expecting in April, I don't think we've got a set date of when the sort of access and protection regulations will be in place. So we will obviously keep an eye on that, and I've put fair deal on the agenda for October in the hope that we might have the regulations by then and maybe have some more detail on how they will work going forward. But as I said, it's the board's opportunity to express if there's anything you wish the board to cover.
Charlotte. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Charlotte.
Apologise.
That's fine. We normally do a 6-month review of the update of the audit, and that's usually at the October meeting. Did you need that to go on there at all? Are the board looking for us to do a sort of a 6-month review of the audit, where we are with our audit plan? Yeah, that's because we normally do that at the October meeting. That's all. So, yeah. So, okay.
And I presume in April, can we have an update? Well, I presume you would have prepared it, an update on the pooling.
would all be done by then, Andy.
Oh, of course, yeah. I can see the pigs flying now. Yeah, yeah,
I'll be all done.
yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Ian.
I think just to take that a little further, would it be possible to possibly arrange a presentation by somebody from LPPI in July or October?
Well, I am in the midst of organising a training morning for Friday, I believe it's the 27th of March. And I will be inviting LPPI. There'll be online training, by the way, so you don't have to dash to Exeter. But I will be inviting LP to do hopefully provide an overview of how everything's going to be working, etc. So
Thank you. Brilliant.
Just thinking of training though, I think from memory the pattern is the July meeting, which is here, normally has an afternoon training session attached too, doesn't it? Is that still the plan? That's certainly been the last few years.
Yes, we have done that in the past. So I will consult with Mark and see what we can do, because obviously we're keen on providing training where we can.
Okay, thanks, Charlie.
Thank you. If there's nothing else, thank you very much. Thank you for attending today. I formally close the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
See you in April.